Good evening. Welcome to Gun Owners of America's Candidate Cam here on Tuesday, February 15th at 7 p.m. And we're honored tonight to have Senator Doug Mastriano with us, the GOA endorsed candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Senator Mastriano, to the show.
Thank you, Val, for having me on. And obviously, Gun Owners of America has a special place in our hearts since you guys are willing to endorse us. And we're going to see victory this year. And you're going to definitely see somebody in Doug Mastriano fighting for the Second Amendment. You know, you and I both wore the uniform, as many of your members have. And this is serious. We see what goes on around the world here. We look at historically how important the Second Amendment is. And it's not about hunting. We know that for a fact. And what we do know is what the Pennsylvania and U.S. Constitution say shall not be infringed upon or even questioned.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And thank you so much for your support of the Second Amendment in the Pennsylvania General Assembly as Senator. You're one of the prime sponsors of our bills we'll talk about in a little bit, Senate Bill 624. But tell us about your background, Senator, your military background and everything leading up to how you came to this spot right now.
You know, I'll try to compact it a bit. So growing up in a military family, my dad was a Navy man. He started off in the back of blimps in the early 50s and ended his career in helicopters because obviously they retired those airships. I remember fondly when I was about 4 years old, my dad was a crewman in the back of the helicopter. He talked the pilot into buzzing our house. And my dad is, right above us. He was waving at us out the door. I was with my brothers. I was like, wow, my dad's a hero. But problem with the Navy, I get seasick, I got motion sickness. I'm like, nah, that's not going to work for me. So I had a lot of influence by my Uncle Joe, who was in Patton's 3rd Army in World War II, 4th Armored Division, and he was one of the spearhead tanks trying to break through to the 101st and 10th Armored Division that were trapped in Bastogne. He was the only survivor as they were getting close to breaking through to our boys in Bastogne. A Tiger tank, he thinks, took him out. He survived because his hatch was open. He was the driver, and he was trying to see in that thick Ardennes fog that happens in December. And he ended up being thrown out of a tank and woke up sitting Indian style in a ditch with his intestines hanging out. So his stories, and my dad raised us too. We're kind of old school, Val. Our parents raised us that you owe a debt to your country. And so there was a lot to that. So all I ever wanted to do was serve in the Army. Mm-hmm. I do have to admit, there's a couple of years I flirted with the Marine Corps because I have 2 brothers who joined the Marines, and they're pretty hooah. But joined the Army, served 30 years, started off on the Iron Curtain with the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. That's why I wear spurs. They were awarded to me in 1989 in the waning days of the Cold War. Saw the Cold War end. I mean, it was incredible welcoming the Eastern Europeans to West Germany and freedom, seeing the spark of light in their eyes that I never saw before in Easterners who've always been oppressed, and seeing how precious and rare our freedoms are. We just take them for granted. But I think we've had a wake-up call the past 2 years or so. Mm-hmm. And then Desert Storm happened. I ended up being with my regiment. We led the main attack against Saddam's armored forces. Big tank battle. 31 years ago this month. It's coming up on the actual tank ground war portion. During this part, of course, was a long air war where the Air Force did a magnificent job softening up the Iraqi forces. And then lots of other assignments. 3rd Infantry Division, I had that hat, served with them. Mm-hmm. 3 tours in Afghanistan, all with NATO. And then ended my career as a professor at the Army War College, a master's level education of the next leaders from around the world, and hit my mandatory retirement date. There's no generals in my career field. I was a colonel, and so I hit my MRD, as we call it. Mm-hmm. And as I was retiring, I was in my last radio interview in uniform talking about Russia and national strategy, and I was complaining to this young man before we were on the air. And I was having a hard time leaving the Army, but especially because I was leaving the country in worse shape than how I got it. And I was just like kind of bloviating on, my service, did it really make a difference, and on and on. And this young man looked over at me and said, well, Colonel, do something about it. And and I really took that to heart. And so for me, never, ever aspiring or thinking about running for office here, I see it as a continuation of my service. I had to do it because I could have rode off to the sunset, as you could have. You got a PhD, you're a colonel as well. And many colonels, ride off to the sunset with a sweet job and just kind of fade away, as Doug MacArthur said.
That's right.
But these are different times. And so that's why I ran for office. That's why I'm a senator. And that's why now I'm running for governor.
Well, thank you. That really helps a lot of us understand. Maybe we didn't know about your background and your military history. Now, your time at the War College, what subjects did you teach there?
So I was in the Department of Military Plans and Strategy. So what we taught was really focus on strategic and operational art of war. So how do you enter? What do we do in Iraq and Afghanistan? How could it have been done better? So it's operational level of operations, and each seminar, there's usually about 24 seminars in each you know class that's actually at the War College, not the guys doing it from home. And each class has 3 international officers. And so it's doing it in the construct of allies and coalition partners. And so it's all about military strategy, really, in the application.
Yeah, so you're probably a Sun Tzu fan like I am. Yeah, I graduated from Air War College. That was required for us to make 06, even in the medical corps.
Wow.
And I'm an MD, so I was introduced to a lot of those concepts. I have utmost respect for our armed services war colleges. Um, Going specifically now to your record in the General Assembly, not only do you have a 100% pro-gun voting record, and that's what we really care about at GOA, in terms of a candidate. We are a pro-Second Amendment, nonpartisan organization, and but not only did you have a perfect voting record, spoke on the floor eloquently in favor of constitutional carry and all that, but you carried one of our chief bills, and that is Senate Bill 624. And if some of our viewers may recall that we had a press conference in May on the Capitol steps with Eric Pratt there, Antonio Okafor, yourself, and a number of other state senators and state representatives showed up to support that. And this bill is very important. It's what we would call a Second Amendment Protection Act. And there are varying degrees of Second Amendment protection acts across the country. Some of them we would call are not so good, and some of them we give a silver rating to, and some of them we give a gold rating to. Your bill is one we give a gold rating to because it actually has either civil or, in some cases in other states, have criminal penalties for someone who would enforce an unconstitutional gun control law. As a lot of our viewers know, the Biden administration through the ATF is about to release regulations by executive fiat on pistol braces and homemade firearms as early as June. So it's very timely. Your bill provides for those civil penalties I just talked about for any state or local official who would collaborate with the federal government, much like as our state did in the Personal Freedom Acts that we passed. We basically said during the Civil War time or antebellum time was, hey, we're not going to cooperate with the Fugitive Slave Act. I mean, that's all on the federal government. No state actor could cooperate on the Fugitive Slave Act. And since we're talking about constitutional rights and fundamental rights, this is huge. It removes qualified immunity for public officials engaging in cooperation. It mandates the Attorney General to prosecute such collaborators and defend Pennsylvanians in court if they're prosecuted. It creates a private right of action. This is important just in case maybe our Attorney General wouldn't be too interested in doing it. I'd be so shocked to know that. It freezes state grant funds from local governments to cooperate in the enforcement, which is also huge. And it forbids local governments from accepting federal bribe money should this be like an unfunded mandate. And then the federal government says, oh, no, we'll give you money to enforce it. That is Senate Bill 624, gold standard Second Amendment Protection Act, prime sponsor, Senator Doug Mastriano, and we have 22 co-sponsors in the Senate. What do you think? What's your thoughts on 624? Why do we need it now?
And I'd like to thank Val and Gun Owners of America, Pennsylvania, for helping us craft that beautiful legislation. It is the gold standard that we've seen in America. And the reason why we have so many co-sponsors, pretty much unprecedented for serious legislation. It's easy to get co-sponsors for legislation or renaming a bridge after a fallen hero or whatever. But for something that you could be called to task for on election day, and almost half of the Senate and the majority of the Republicans are signed up as co-sponsors, and that's huge. We need to run it. I don't know why there's a propensity in our branch of government to wait until the executive office or the courts do something and then we respond. It'd be nice for a change if we actually got on the offensive here in anticipation of something coming from the Biden administration here to protect our Second Amendment rights. Why should we wait to respond? We should get ahead of it and actually have it out there and put the Wolf administration on record on whatever he's going to do, and then then let's override the veto. By the way, half of the Senate is up for re-election, And many of those several of those Democrat senators are in red counties, and they'll be hard pressed to get reelected if they vote against us, by the way. So even with an override, I think we do have a fair chance.
Yes, and let me just read some key names on the co-sponsorship list in case anybody wants to know. Senator Dave Argel, who is the chairman of the State Government Committee, where your bill is parked, and I know you're on that committee as well. Also, Senator Kim Ward, who is the Senate Majority Leader, and our Senate President, Jake Corman, is also on this bill. So to your point, Senator, with the entire Republican leadership on Senate Bill 624, including the committee chair, what are we waiting for? You know, I know there's a timing issue. Oh, we want to wait for the Biden administration. But what, like you said, why not get ahead of it? It's the right thing to do. What do you say?
Yeah, it absolutely is the right thing to do. If you know, when people are on the campaign trail on our side, I mean, they sound more ardent defenders of the Second Amendment than you or I, for that matter. So let's walk our talk. Let's actually do that. These are God-given rights. They can't be stripped away, according to our founders. Although the current government and administration are trying to strip it away. But let's protect these rights, and let's prevent the Biden administration and his arm of whatever branches will come down to enforce it. Let's prevent them from imposing unconstitutional edicts upon our state.
Exactly. And there's a strong history in this country, and you're a historian, Senator, and you know this, that of states not cooperating when the federal government overstepped its bounds. And this is the beauty of our system, the beauty that the founders of our country put together, is there are not only checks and balances within each branches of the government on the state and federal level, but the states themselves are a check against federal power. And contrary to all what the liberal media says and all the naysayers, oh, you're all just a bunch of insurrectionists or whatever else. It's not true. It actually leads to a peaceful solution to the problem, because non-enforcement and that sends a strong signal to the federal government saying we're going in the wrong direction. There is no popular support. The states will not help us enforce that.
Yeah, exactly. And we definitely had the A team. We're blessed by Providence to have some great minds, and brilliant brains out there with George Washington and Hancock and the Adams and Franklin and on that they could foresee with this new type of government. Yes, Rome had a Senate, and had a republic of sorts, but not. And they looked at the Greek democracy. We're not a democracy. Everyone says it, but able to merge elements of both those experiments from history and then wrapping it up in biblical concepts, with the three aspects of our government, to have some sort of human perfection in government where there are checks and balances. There are tensions. There's supposed to be tensions between the judicial, executive, and legislative branches. That's normal. It's just sad though when in last year's situation, when our courts had a chance at the federal level to actually help us out and make decisions on some of the issues that we're facing, then they refused to weigh in. So in some regards, I do think we do have a constitutional crisis in regards to voting integrity and what have you, because the high court of the U.S. Did not weigh in either way. But this is one thing we can do as lawmakers. We create the law in the House and the Senate. Of course, the courts are supposed to look at the constitutionality and not write law. And then, of course, the governor is supposed to enforce that. But this legislation, 624, it blocks any attempt from our attorney general or the executive, the governor, if it would be somebody that's anti Second Amendment. It prevents them from cooperating, and that'd be a law. So if say things are stacked against us here and edicts come down and money comes down from the federal government to enforce these laws, this says no, it's not constitutional, and therefore cannot stand.
Yes, and you mentioned a favorite character of ours, Governor Tom Wolf. and if people have been following Pennsylvania GOA, they know we've put 3 bills on his desk this year. Constitutional carry, I'm sorry, 2, constitutional carry, and also House Bill 979 to strengthen the firearms preemption law. Both of those bills were vetoed. Okay. So and then last session, 2 other bills went to his desk and were vetoed. And I think Governor Wolf is going to be known for his poison pen in vetoing And what this has done, and people ask me, why do you bother doing this? Why do you bother sending something to his desk if you know he's going to veto it? Don't we just want to wait? No, we don't want to wait. And the reason is we get a recorded vote of everybody in the Senate and the House. We know where they stand, and we also know where the executive stands. Now, we have made the members and supporters of Gun Owners of America and our allies, such as you, Senator Mastriano, and the other legislators who supported and voted for this, we have made firearms rights, Second Amendment rights in Pennsylvania, Article 1, Section 21 rights, a defining issue, one of the chief defining issues in the 2022 midterm elections. That is one of the reasons for pushing this, is that we get a recorded vote and we want to know where people stand. But I'll let you take it from there about Tom Wolf. What do you got to say? And by extension, Josh Shapiro.
Thank you. You know, I do hear that a lot too. You know, why run that Second Amendment? Because it's going to get vetoed anyway. Why run that pro-life legislation? Because, you know, Tom Wolf's going to veto it. What a weak thing to say. You know, so there we are. We have the opportunity to reassert our rights. We don't know if he's going to veto it. So there's several elements to this here. We need to stop being, what's the right word? Pragmatic, pretending
Yes.
to be pragmatic. You know, let's not do anything until we have success. If we had that kind of, that's why. Okay, we're going to probably disagree here historically, but I believe it's because of that feckless approach that we had the Civil War. Because in England, meanwhile, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, we had a minister of parliament called William Wilberforce. Every year, he fought against slavery. He took on the wealthy lobbyists and the pro-slave lobby, the industrialists, those running the sugarcane fields across the world. He took them on every year. And thank God he didn't, go with the naysayers. Hey, William, you're wasting your time. You know, it's not going to get passed. It's going to get stopped. And the prime minister won't support it and the king won't back it. And for 20 years, he didn't have any legislative victories. After 20 years, every year fighting, he had his first legislative victory. By 47 years, he had ended, almost single-handedly, not quite, but ended slavery across the British Empire around the world. Had we had somebody like that who believed so much into freedom that he was able to risk his legislative life and take on the wealthy donors on the other side, and he won in the end. Second Amendment and pro-life, the same thing. Every year, if we really believe that you have a right to keep and bear arms, if you believe that's true, then every year you should exercise any legal legislative power you have. And one way you have to do that is running it through the House and Senate. And we have a Republican House and Senate. Why not run it through that? And here's another thought, because sometimes people ask me, why does a legislative body so rarely run, hard bills? And my wife Brevi actually had the answer to that, because they don't want to be called to task for a hard vote. Many of some of my colleagues don't want to vote on Second Amendment, don't want to vote on pro-life or any other hard issue, because at election time they're going to, they say one thing, but then how did they vote? And so it's important also that we know where people stand and we get them on record. And
Yep.
additionally, from a integrity aspect, we need to call the governor out as well. Let the governor veto that. Let's know where he stands. Maybe we'll win in the end if we persevere. But all I do know is in Galatians 6:9, it says, "Grow not weary in doing good, because in due time you'll reap your harvest." And so the only way we're going to win in the end and preserve our rights is by persevering and being persistent, because this is a marathon. This is, that's not going to be, oh, we ran this great bill and now we're good to go. No, it's persistence. And that's how we have these freedoms that have been maintained for about 250 years.
Yeah, I obviously agree with you 100%. 100% in everything that you said there. We get a recorded vote, we push it. It's the right thing to do. We always say in our training at GOA, we have a political activism training, that the greatest force to overcome in politics is inertia.
Yes.
Okay. And the reason is politicians don't want to, is if anytime they take a vote on something, they risk offending someone. And if they offend someone, they could lose the next election. So don't do anything. Or even better, make it appear like you're doing something without doing it. Like maybe co-sponsoring bills and not moving them. Oh, wait. I've seen that before. And so we don't want that to happen to 624. I mean, if your name's on this bill, or if you're a leader in the Pennsylvania Senate, by golly, we expect you to move that bill, right? And especially we know what's coming in June. There's really no reason really to delay with that. Okay, let's just change the subject a little bit. I know everybody's looked at you and seen you really as a leader in this state, not only for Second Amendment rights, which we greatly appreciate, but during That's the pandemic. One, you standing up for Pennsylvania business owners. I remember you standing in Adams County and York County, all over the place, standing up for businesses that were shut down arbitrarily and capriciously by Governor Tyrant Tom Wolf. And also, the other thing is you standing up for election integrity. So please tell us what happened, between you and Jake Corman that got this thing derailed. I think people want to know, and they want to hear it from your voice, in your own words. We, as you know, support repeal of Act 77. We support officially at GOA, the constitutional amendment that you have that would essentially eliminate mail-in ballots. Let us know what happened with election integrity. Give us the raw truth.
So the 3rd of November, 2020, the election happens. I go to bed and Donald Trump was up, 700,000 votes or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know why Fox News isn't calling it, but he won. That's a greater margin than what happened, 4 years before. And then I wake up the next day and it had evaporated. And meanwhile, and this is, I'm not prone to hyperbole or exaggeration. I'm hearing from thousands of people from across the state about encounters they had at the polling station. Hey, Doug, I went in to vote. They said I voted by mail. I didn't. I received a stack of 10 mail-in votes. What am I going to do with this? And do something. Doug, Senator Mastriano, do something. And so I'm sitting there thinking, what exactly can I do? And then in the meanwhile, the Friday after the election, Senator Corman goes out with one of the House leaders outside the Capitol, gives a press conference, and we're not aware of any fraud, and we'll just move on, kind of thing. And I'm like, they're not hearing from people like I am. I mean, clearly something's wrong here. And so it's mounting week after week, 3 weeks into this afterwards, and people like, you got to do something. You represent us, look into this. And so I hold a hearing on the 25th of November, the day before Thanksgiving, and did not ask for permission from Senator Corman, did not correspond with him on that. I was a committee chair. I did ask that Senator Argyle use his committee, which I thought was more appropriate than my committee, and hold a hearing. Just find out what the people have to say, have some experts come in Gettysburg, and let the chips fall where they may. There was no agenda other than a traditional legislative hearing where we just fact-finding, and that's what hearings are mostly about normally. And then, kind of blows the whole thing apart. We hear from, one expert. He goes, when the state, when they stopped counting in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, the first night, and they turned it back on, 570,000 ballots were dropped, and only 3,290 went for Donald Trump. Okay, that's a red flag, and then we're hearing from eyewitnesses. We had one elder lady zooming in out from Allegheny County, an 82-year-old lady, and her son and daughter were there. And my mom was so excited to vote. She goes in a polling station. They said, no, you already voted by mail. And she's like, I did not do that. That's why I'm here. I mean, and so my closing remarks at that hearing was, media, I know you're lambasting us already, as conspiracy theorists and all that. Do your job, prove us wrong. And, I did not talk about this in the hearing. Maybe I did. I can't remember. But we did have a case back in the mid-90s where there was a state Senate seat that was contested. And there was the Democrat won, but the Republican, Bruce Marks, he went to the media, and the media did the job. The Inquirer, believe it or not, did investigative journalism and found out that there was all kinds of fraud. And the Democrat senator was already sworn in. He was removed, and Bruce Marks was put in his place. This was significant because it turned the Senate from Democrat to Republican. It's been Republican, I think, ever since. And so I had really counted on the media doing their job. That's what part of the First Amendment is to hold those in power accountable and to be honest with it. But they didn't. Instead, we're painted as baseless claims of voting fraud. I mean, it gets so ridiculous that even taxpayer dollars using to fund our state version of PBS here. If any Republican is mentioned that, of course, was looked after voting integrity, they put advanced baseless claims of voting fraud in 2020. That gets a little old, and I don't think our tax dollars should fund any of those organizations. Okay, so we Thanksgiving happens. I'm pressing leadership to do something. Then we're out of session on the 30th of November, 11 p.m. until early January. We're out of session, and I'm trying to. I do a resolution to try to get us to stay, and there's no desire to bring us back in. And anyway, January comes around, and Jake tells us basically, hey, we're going to hold hearings, so Doug and everyone else don't do anything. We got it. The household's pretty good hearings. The Senate one, I think we get it done more. And then those happen. We're now pushing March and April. Okay, you got to wait for the report to come out. Okay, now it's May going into June, and then meanwhile I'm watching what's going on in Arizona. I fly down to Arizona with Representative Rob Kaufman, and they have like the gold standard of voting integrity. I mean, forensic analysis, ballots, magnifying glasses, more people watching things and counting things than you're required constitutionally under state. I mean, it was magnificent. I'm like, we need to do that here. And I'm talking to Senator Corman often. This is all truth and facts. I'm going to keep my feelings out of it. And we're having trouble moving ahead. He's like, hey, Doug, we're in budget session in June. Let's not derail the budget. I'm like, that's our only leverage, actually. But anyway, we get into July, and I'm being stonewalled. So I released subpoenas for 3 counties. I think it's on July 7th of last year.
Yeah.
And I give the counties a little bit more than 3 weeks. And you have to do that because you have to, even though that they're all going to ask for subpoenas, you have to, by legally in the eyes of the court, you can, I give you 3 days to respond, then I'm going to give you a subpoena. That's not how it works. And so the subpoenas are running out. The first day that I can get now I have to hold a voting session of my committee to issue subpoenas. That's a fact. In person vote. It's the summertime. I'm trying to find out what day we can actually hold a in-person voting session. I think we find a date like on August 5th that works for everybody. And Jake Corman, right before I'm about to sunshine it, we have a sunshine law in Pennsylvania. I'm about to sunshine it. He calls the Republican members of my committee and tells them that it's canceled. Don't show up. And I'm like, okay. I probably thought a little bit too much of my leadership ability. I worked in NATO for 4 years and was able even to get the French to work with me and the Germans and Belgians. I'm like, I took my, even though I thought that was extremely unprofessional, if he had a serious question or concern, he should have been a man and said, Doug, this is why I need you to hold off. Here's my questions. They weren't even serious questions because we'd addressed them all. And my chief of staff, who now works in your organization, Tony DeGespie, had been working tirelessly and in good faith with Jake's staff, as well as with Jake. And so I'm like, okay, Jake, lay out what your concerns are. We had addressed it several times already. We addressed it again, and I'm finding I'm going nowhere. So I have another committee vote scheduled. And not only are we blocked from having a committee meeting, I'm locked out of committee rooms in the Capitol. He owns the committee rooms. And so that's what happened. And so I can only postulate why Jake did this. All I know is no forensic investigation happened on my watch. And I have serious doubts that it's going to happen at all at this point here.
Yes. And we also heard about something very disturbing. And I think it was back in early August, if memory serves, is very in punitive fashion. The Senate President, Jay Corman, removed your entire Capitol staff, with the exception of one person.
So that is a fact, and it's unprecedented in the Senate of Pennsylvania. And so stripped me of my committee chair, and then did remove all my staff from Harrisburg, and that lasted some months. I do have a couple people back, but what a lack of professionalism. But it's something really beneath, I think, what should be expected of somebody in a leadership position, as an elected official. It's a very immature leadership style. Obviously, it's designed to send a message to his colleagues. One thing I do know is that never before do I know historically has a president pro tem of the Senate been drawn out of the new maps. We have redistricted. Obviously, that happens every 10 years. And you think that the leader of the Pennsylvania Senate would get the last word. And I had nothing to do with the maps. This just gives you a feel for what's going on behind the scenes here. He no longer has a district. And it's gone. And if he's going to run, he's going to have to run against Senator Dush, which obviously would be a hard thing to pull off. So that's why we hear from him, it's either governor or bust, because there is no bust, really. So,
yeah, I mean, I can only speculate, but it certainly seems from my perspective as, political operative in this state is that it was designed to pump him up and to knock you down a notch, and it was a dirty politics done on the inside. And I've said this multiple times, we do appreciate it when Senate leadership like Jake Corman and Kim Ward run our bills, but we also see, having worked in that building now directly for almost 2 years, I see what goes on behind the scenes, and what you see like co-sponsorships and things in front is not what you see behind. It takes a lot of effort, lobbying work, our grassroots activists pushing to get some of these people to run the bills that we need run, right? Not everyone like you is a champion. And so, it's like we have a favorite saying at GOA. It's from Senator Everett Dirksen, and it goes like this: when I feel the heat, I see the light. so so we're GOA, we are in the environmental control business. Okay, so
I love it.
right. So we turn up the heat, and then all of a sudden they see the light. We have seen dramatic change in Senator Lisa Baker, and surprisingly ran all of her bills, and she's really stepped up to the plate. That's very pleasing to see. And it's so when we change our tactics a little bit and just say, and respectfully, politely saying, we expect you to run these bills. I mean, you campaign on being pro Second Amendment, and guess what? That's what we expect you to do. And then they proffer all these excuses. So we just continue to ask, and we continue to turn up the heat. And then the other thing is we have to do is we hold people accountable in election season for their votes, and that's another reason for getting those votes, is for that purpose. But where do we stand right now on going back to election integrity? Where do we stand right now on that issue? I know Senator Dush has taken over the process, and he was our bill sponsor in Senate Bill 565 for constitutional carry, which made it to the governor's desk. So where kind of we stand now? What is the status update on election integrity?
Well, I mean, it went in a different direction, in a direction that I wouldn't have gone in. They subpoenaed 17 things, which was mostly machines, what have you. I do believe that any forensic investigation or forensic audit, notice the language I'm using, not a review, an audit or investigation, needs to start and end with the ballots. That's where the money is made. That's where the truth is really found. Yes, the software that might be compromised or that can goes online or what have you. We're hearing different things. That would be supporting material. So I don't know why we didn't start with the ballots. The ballots will be destroyed in what, I don't know, 7 months from now. They're only going to exist for 22 months. So we're down to 6-7 months. I should not do math in public. So I don't think it's headed in a good direction. The money's not available for what was allocated to actually do a full forensic investigation, AKA what we saw in Phoenix, Arizona. So, I think people need to bring their expectations down quite a bit, because it's not what I was going after, and it's not what I was going to do, because you know, and I'm tired of the left. They like to demonize us. They like to call us names, and then we're finding out some of the things that came out in the news, last night from Durham reports, like, whoa, everything you accused the Trump administration of doing, actually, you guys did. And I get really tired of the name calling. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are, backing my campaign, is because we're pretty fearless. I mean, we're humans, but we're pretty fearless when it comes to, staring down the media. The media did mention in November in a very interesting piece in the left wing journal that they blacklisted 21 Republican state legislators. I was number one on the list, and that I was wondering why all the major rags across the nation were going after me pretty hard. Just ridiculous, attacking things in my personal life even. And in the end, they admitted, we targeted Mastriano, and all we did is make him more popular. And I talked to Senator Jay Costa, who's the lead Democrat in the Senate, and I saw him Wednesday last week. And I said, hey, what you said in November, I appreciate that. And he thought I was going to say something that was going to get in his face. He goes, what did I say? And I said, in that article, you're so honest. You said, although you guys hit me hard, you said, and I quote, all we did is give Doug Mastriano more street cred. And I'm like, yes, you did. But it's Val. When as a retired officer in the military, our character, our integrity, our good name means a lot, and watching it drag through the mud. And I think that really gets your priorities straight. Are you doing it for your good name, or for preserving our republic for the next generation?
Right.
And that's always been my desire and intention. So when people go into the polling station and they're not sure their vote counts, we got a serious problem in this constitutional republic. We, as legislators, we're failing the people if we don't do everything we can to restore people's confidence. And it starts with a forensic investigation and not a review. The review doesn't get us anywhere. We need to find out what happened. And if nothing happened, let the chips fall where they may. Great. People, your concerns are, unfounded, and here's why. But sadly, the closer we look, the more problems we see. And our system right now has a lot of flaws to it. And I think you'll probably ask me about some of those flaws.
Yes, there are a lot of flaws in the system, and one of the things that we hear sometimes after we endorsed you is, why would, and this is the chief criticism that I hear, why would I vote for Doug Mastriano for governor when he voted for Act 77? And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about Act 77. And I know you've brought this up multiple times. I know Teddy Daniels has and other candidates. Please tell us what really happened. I know there's a pejorative out there. They call you mail-in Mastriano. And I was like, okay, now is the time to say, once again, I know you've done it before. What's the real truth behind this?
Yeah, what a stupid thing to say. And if there's anyone listening that develops your opinion on me based off of a meme, there's a lot more problems there than Doug Mastriano. So obviously, it says in the Bible, Isaiah, God talks to Isaiah, says, "Come, let us reason." Yes, use reason and not memes to form your opinion on legislation or a candidate. And that's something we expect the left to do, to follow, stupid ideas and assertions. It also, I was a military intelligence officer in the Army, and we had a saying when we had intelligence coming in or information coming in, it would be consider the source. The source of most of these memes, by the way, is a gentleman that still lives with mom, and hasn't really done much in life. Never served in the Army, was not a first responder. I don't even think was a Boy Scout. So as far as I know, and so it's not a credible source. And you're dealing with people who are politicians in their hearts, and they will lie and cheat and steal to get your vote. And that's definitely not somebody we want for office. Okay, now let's get to Act 77. What was voted on in the General Assembly back in 2019 was not what was in place in 2020. And I'm going to lay facts out. I live and reside in Realville. Facts are stubborn things, John Adams said.
Oh, yes.
So voting reform package happened. There was some good things about it, such as removing straight party voting, and that benefits the Republicans because we're still lean Democrat registration wise. And why do I say that? With the removal of straight party voting, we have the first real Republican treasurer, Stacey Garrity, who was outspent 10-1. By the way, she only spent $250,000. The incumbent outspent her 10 times that, millions of dollars. She was told by the establishment Republicans, "We're not going to support you. You can't win. We're not going to give you any donations." So she was pretty much on her own. And because we took away straight party voting, people said, "Yeah, we're going to give Stacey Garrity a shot." First time since the 50s we had a real Republican. There was a lady there in the 80s, but she switched to Democrats once she was in, and as well as an inspector general, Tim DeFore. So, but what happened with voting? On the 17th of September, the anniversary of the Battle of Antietam, by the way, the 17th of September of 2020, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court rewrote election law. They changed the law that was passed. What did they do? They believed the Democrat narrative coming out of Washington, D.C. and Nancy Pelosi's office that the U.S. Postal Service was broken and the ballots are going to be late. And so in response to that fake news, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court added 3 days to receive mail-in ballots. That was not constitutional. Every other election, ballots had to be received by 8 p.m. on the night of the election. That's a huge change. And anyone that watched my lives, they remember me because you and I are a little bit older. You remember mimeograph machines. I said, those 3 days, you're going to be some guy in the back room. How many votes are we shy? And then I, had the hand crank on the mimeograph machine.
And spelling it.
Yes. Now it's just like punching, 10,000 and hit print kind of thing.
Right.
Okay, that's bad. So that means people could be creating ballots, after the election. But you might say, well, they required a postal mark. Well, that's not true. The Pennsylvania State Supreme Court took away the safeguard of a postal mark, and they said just for the presidential election on November 3rd, 2020, no postal marks are required. So that just opened the floodgates to fraud and corruption. That was asking for trouble. And then if that's not bad enough, you didn't even need to have a signature in there. They took away the requirement for matching signatures. So literally, you could have somebody producing ballots and there's no postal mark and there's no signature or no matching signature. You just kind of put an X in the spot there. And so the law was compromised and rewritten. If that was not bad enough, the Wolf administration then weighed in. We have our failed Secretary of State Bookvar, who since resigned in shame. She came in and allowed, at first, Democrat counties to cure ballots. What does that mean? She allowed ballots that were incorrectly filled out to be corrected, cured. So when Val and I were in the military and stationed overseas and we're doing, an absentee ballot, it was very clear on the envelope. If we filled it out incorrectly, they would set it aside. I say throw it out. They would set it aside and not count it. And so I remember times, Val, that I'd have to reopen my ballot because I was like, oh crap, I forgot to fill in this spot, or didn't sign it in the right spot. but she allowed the correction of ballots. Just you could pick, yeah, they vote for the right guy. Yep. You signed it in the wrong spot. Can I correct that for you? You call up the constituent. Yes. And then there was some more unilateral changes. So to pin that on me or any other Republican is just naive, stupid, and ignorant and dishonest. So please don't listen to somebody who's running for office and is willing to distort facts and go void of reason and trying to make accusations.
Yeah, I mean, and as I often say, and we had discussions about this internally at GOA, 2020 in many places, not Pennsylvania and other states included, it wasn't mail-in voting, it was mail-out voting.
Yes.
I mean, multiple ballots sent to people, 3 or 4. I mean, the whole system was broken and just ripe for fraud. It's so transparently obvious what happened. Nobody in 2019 could have predicted what happened with COVID in 2020. It threw a monkey wrench into everything. But like a lot of things, it focused a laser on what the problem is with Act 77, and it's ripe for abuse, and it's been abused. And most importantly, you have been the leader in taking the steps to correct that, right? So your constitutional amendment, once and for all, to get this taken care of, right? That's also stuck in the Senate State Government Committee and needs to get out. I know the Commonwealth Court just recently ruled that Act 77 was unconstitutional. Of course, it's going to the Supreme Court, SCOPA, and that's I think 7-2 Democrat. So I think that's the ratio.
5-2.
5-2. Sorry, you're right. I'm thinking Supreme Court. Yeah. So of the United States, 9 instead of 7. So yeah, right. So it's 5-2. So it's 5-2 Democrat. So what's going to happen there? What do you predict, if you can predict, the Supreme Court is going to do? What's your gut feeling about that?
Yeah, so we were actually trained in predictive analysis and the indications of warning. This is pretty easy because the same court that rewrote and changed election law, aka Act 77, is going to make a ruling in the same law that they altered back in 2020. So how are they going to rule? They're going to rule in their own favor and strike down the Commonwealth Court's decision.
Yeah, I mean that's my fear too. Now I've talked to some attorneys and they were like, I don't know if they can really go back on this, but they'll find some unique and creative way to redefine something that we never thought of to overturn it. And that's sort of my gut feeling. So once again, that makes it even more important to get your bill out of committee.
Yes.
And get that constitutional amendment rolling. Okay. So repealing Act 77, there's that. And there's also the constitutional amendment process. So that's where we are now. Now, sort of in the last 15 minutes, I want to say, why should people vote for Doug Mastriano? I know we're going to, you and Lou Barletta are sort of the top runners in this race. What differentiates you from Lou Barletta? And then after that, tell us what are the top 3 things. I mean, we had somebody ask about gas prices earlier. What are the top 3 things other than firearms rights that you're concerned about in the state? We already talked about firearms rights. We already talked about election integrity. Other than those 2 things, what are the top 3? And plus, what differentiates you from Lou?
Yeah, well, so Rebby and I, my wife Rebby and I, travel across the state here, and we sometimes we go to these candidate forums and we have to sit through mind-numbing speeches, and it's just really painful to listen to people. If you elect me for governor, I promise, I pledge, I will. And I'm sitting there thinking about all the shots I took by standing for freedom and standing for the people. And I'm like, where the hell were you the past 2 years? Because talk is cheap. If you are unwilling to step out of your comfort zone, out of your mansion, or whatever you're doing, and to help the people in our time of crisis and to fight for our freedoms, then you're not going to do anything as governor. It's just talk. You just want the title. You want the power. One thing to differentiate me is I've been out there constantly, steadily, every day fighting for your freedoms. And if you're not confident in my ability to do that as governor, then there's no way I can convince you otherwise. But all I know is talk is cheap. I've been taking the shots by the left, and they hit me with their best shot, from that old 80s song. Yep. And we're still standing, and we're going to win in the end because we're going to persevere. There's nothing they could say or do to me to get me to step aside, because this is about our freedoms. I could have ridden off to the sunset. I had a sweet retirement job lined up that was offered to me, and I refused to do that because I knew that our freedoms were at stake. So if you love your freedoms, and if you want somebody that really is going to fight for you because he has been fighting for you, then I'm your guy. Simple as that. Talk is cheap, proof is in the pudding. I've been out there for 2 years constantly, steadily, and oftentimes a solitary, lonely voice out there, fighting for freedom. On the other side here, because of that, we have a massive, and this, it's funny how the candidates talk about it. We have a grassroots, campaign. I'm like, then why do only 18 people show up at your events? I had one candidate show up in my county a couple of days ago, and I think including his people, was 18 or 22 showed up, and that's normal for most of these candidates. So that's why they have to go to the Lincoln dinners and the forums, because they can't draw flies. Meanwhile, Rebby and I travel the state from Philadelphia to Erie. We've been all over the state here. And usually the events we have are the biggest they've ever had, or there's people on a waiting list that can't get in. And we were at one event in Berks County, and there's about 1,000 people in this warehouse-looking building. It was 90-some degrees in there, and they didn't leave. And the organizers were supposed to put me first because the highway is going to be closed for construction. And they put me last. And I'm like, what? Why'd you do that? We got to get out of here. And they're like, we know when you leave, everyone else is going to leave because it's so miserable in here. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we do have a grassroots movement. We have a presence in every county. It's strong. It's dedicated. We're going to win the primary. We will win a general election. So what else stands out for me is I was warned 2 years ago next month that, you can't take Tom Wolf on. He's so popular. And Val, you probably remember the polls of the time always had him in 60-some% popularity.
Yep.
And, I don't even entertain these goofy ideas or admonitions from people in politics. I'm like, our freedoms are being assaulted. Small businesses are being shut down. Students are being, oppressed and kept out of school, and families are suffering and uncertainty. And it was all about our basic freedoms, standing for your freedoms. Another thing that makes us stand out, of course, is that where I stand. There's no ambiguity on where I stand on, Second Amendment. I do have a solid voting record, as you see, on the Second Amendment, on life, and any other conservative issues. I've been in the legislative body going on 3 years, coming up this June, and for 3 years in a row, I've been one of the top-rated CPAC legislators. I got the certificates to prove it here. So we're steady. Talk is cheap. I would say look at the measure of a man, his hands or his or her works or what have you, and we're the real deal. I think one last thing is motivation. Why are people in this? First off, what did they do when you needed them? If they did nothing, talk is cheap. You can't count on them to stand for you. And of course, our motivation here is to restore freedom. That's my number one objective here in Pennsylvania, is we want our freedoms 100% restored and not going back. And so why do I say that? When we were holding these rallies across the state, and especially in Harrisburg, we had one rally, I think there was kind of about 7,000 people showed up. Although the media, I found media, if we have thousands, they say hundreds. If we have hundreds, they say dozens, but the opposite for their guys. And so they said we had hundreds. It was actually about 7,000 that were counted. There's people in the crowd there that don't share, my beliefs, from a moral perspective. They have lifestyles that will disagree with me and I with them. And I'll ask them, I'm so thankful you're here. And I know we don't share a lot in common. Why are you backing somebody like me? And they'll say, because I know you're not going to impose your worldview on me. You're about the American way of life, living the way as we see fit, not as a governor or president see fit. That's a big distinction. And I think for people like you and me and other veterans, it's about basic freedoms, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our core document there from the Declaration. And we got to get back to basics. And so another obviously important area is restoring families. And as governor, what does that mean? So we have, restore freedom, let's say rebuild families. We're under assault here in Pennsylvania. We're overtaxed. And you mentioned the gas tax. And by the way, that was a tax passed by a Republican legislator and a Republican governor. We don't pin that on Tom Wolf. It's tempting to do that, but it's not his tax. It's everywhere I look, there's another tax. I pulled in behind a pickup truck that has a larger fuel tank than me, and there was $96 on that gas pump when he pulled out of there. And I'm staring at that, and I'm like, $20 of that was taxes, 7 to the federal government, and the remaining 13 to Tom Wolf in Harrisburg. And that we were told in 2015 that, hey, just raise this tax one time and it will fix our roads and bridges. Yeah, talk to that bridge in Pittsburgh that collapsed the other day. We're constantly being promised things by politicians, and it never goes to our favor. Just like property taxes in 2005 or 2004 under Ed Rendell, bring gambling to Pennsylvania, all that money going to Jersey and the casinos will stay here and your property taxes will go away. And, lie to once again, how's that working out for you?
Right.
So we're in the top 10 of the most heavily taxed in the nation. Depending what website you look at, we range around 8 or so in the most tax. We're the 12th most expensive on public education. We produce this is a 2-year-old report by the National Education Association, where we produce a 28 quality students. So we're not even getting our bang for the buck. We're funding a system of schooling and not the students. And so how do we restore freedom? Well, first off, property taxes need to end. We got to, and we need to find a way to do that without hopefully increasing, income tax or sales tax. There's got to be a way. Our way is to fund students rather than the system. So right now, according to the NEA document on the state results, we're paying out now $19,000 per student. Are your kids getting a university level education, with room and board? No. So we're funding a system here that's not working for the parents or for the kids for that matter, especially when the unions are calling the shots on reopening and masking. This is insanity. And so my idea on property taxes is, because up to about half of that property tax is actually publicly funded schools, is that the money should go with the kids and not to the schools. And so if you decide to send your kid to a certain school, homeschool, religious school, private school, cyber school, or public school, the money should go with them. That'll increase competition and accountability. And I think that way we can bring down dramatically the cost of education, because we know about some of the private education institutions are almost about half of what we're paying in public schools. It's funny, they get better education in the schools and we're paying for half out of pocket for parents. On the other side here, we can suspend elements of the taxation, like this gas tax, when it spikes like this here. The so what is, why is inflation so bad? Why are things going up? Because when energy costs go up, everybody's paying for that. The transportation companies aren't going to cover it. It's going to increase the cost of the goods that are being transported. Obviously, this is basic economics. And so that cost is passed down to the middle class and the lower class. The business owners are going to have to pass the cost down to us here to stay in business. That's how it goes. Right. And so another way we could benefit, of course, Pennsylvania is the number 2 energy producer of natural gas. Why don't we get, Val, I got rid of my gas tank here. It was so darn expensive. I saw no benefit for having it on my house. I mean, electrical is expensive, but not as much as I was putting out for the propane and what have you. Right. Why don't we get any benefit? Because Tom Wolf, almost every year, his tax our energy sector. I think if we roll back many of the regulations on exploiting our natural gas resources, which, by the way, some scientists say are going to last a couple centuries now. It's not going to burn out real quick. We could fuel this nation. We could fuel this state. We could open a door to business by lowering energy costs, and this will bring businesses here and make it easier to live. It'd be cheaper to live here if energy costs are driven down. And here's one last thought before I take a pause so you can interact with me. Is in 2016, I was still in the Army. I was focused in on my studies and strategy around Russia and our Baltic allies in Northern Europe. And Boston was running out of energy. It was a really cold winter that year. It was a terrible winter. And instead of buying liquefied natural gas from Pennsylvania, they actually brought a couple ships in from Russia to fuel them in Boston. I mean, what kind of madness is this? Pennsylvania should be the light of the nation. I mean, this is where it all began in 1776. You walk in that capital where you are often, as I am, when you look around at the splendor, that's when Pennsylvania was the wealthiest state in the nation. That should be us today, because of failed politics and weak politicians. We're taxing ourselves into the ground. We could be, with a governor like me, we could be the Florida of the Northeast. We could fuel the Northeast. We could be the freest state in the nation. We could open up for business by rolling back taxes and be a place where people want to live instead of fleeing.
Yeah, I know. And, the statistics aren't very good for people leaving the state. So real quick for us, top three things outside of gun rights and the election integrity. What are the top 3 issues that you want to tackle as governor of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so you covered a couple of them right there. Obviously, gun rights need to be persevered. That's inherent. And right. Obviously, voting integrity will be huge. As governor, there's a lot I can do unilaterally to bring order in the chaos of our elections and restore people's faith in it. As governor, it's something I really don't want to share on here, because the other candidates will, grab it and they'll run around like it's their concept. But talking privately with people, I have a very clear, coherent, an achievable plan on restoring integrity. So on the other issues here, number 1 in Pennsylvania, and for me, is the right to life. If there's whether a preborn child or an elderly person, everyone should have the right to life. And the way I've seen, okay, we have about 30 some thousand abortions in Pennsylvania every year. By the way, more than half of the abortions come out of a minority population, which is just like 20%, 13% of our population makes up roughly, I'm probably wrong on the stats here. Latino and African American babies are being aborted disproportionately. I call that a genocide. So the right to life. Okay, on the elderly side here, we saw how the Wolf administration 2 years ago, ahead of Governor Cuomo in New York, decided to send the sick into the back into the homes, which unleashed a plague, killing over 16,000 of our elderly. The right to life needs to extend from cradle to grave, or in the womb to the grave, kind of thing. The other issue, of course, is school choice. I think this is one of the core problems with our overtaxation. It's driving so much, and because of this unending, the governor is asking for another $1.3 billion for public education. That's on top of the $30 billion that's already spent on public education, according to the NEA in Pennsylvania. How do you sustain this? And you're not even getting the quality that you expect. I believe we're going to be in the 30s or 40s as far as state, output, because of the heavy-handed shutdowns that so many of the schools have had the past 2 years here, bullying and persecuting our kids. So obviously taking on school choice and making that a reality is going to be one of my top objectives. And then finally, of course, is the taxation issue. And one of the priorities of my administration, of course, will be taking on property tax, because how is it that we have about 10,000 people a year on average lose their homes by failure to pay property taxes. If you're negligent for 2 years, you lose your home. It's a sheriff's sale. It's sold on pennies on the dollar. Most of those, the overwhelming majority of those, are elderly retirees who've raised their families, were good citizens, paid their taxes, many of whom served in the military. And then in their golden years, they're finding themselves out on the street. That's a bit of hyperbole, but out of their home, their dream home that they thought they owned, but really all along they've been paying, rent to the government in the form of property taxes. That needs to end. It's unconscionable and it's immoral to me.
Thank you. Thank you for that excellent summary. I really, really appreciate that. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to bring some other things in that you really wanted to focus on as the next governor of Pennsylvania, which brings, hey, I'm confident. I'm really hoping you get through the primary. The people of Pennsylvania are behind you to be elected, to be the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania. Then you're going to face, here in the last few minutes, you're going to face a general election. You're going to face Josh Shapiro. And I tell everybody this, and I am not exaggerating this. Josh Shapiro would be the most anti-gun governor in the history of Pennsylvania. He wrote an attorney general opinion in 2019 trying to reclassify pieces of metal and plastic as firearms. I mean, trying to say a piece of metal is a gun. It's crazy, right? And by fiat, he did this. And of course, he was sued in court, and there's a stay, and it's still tied up in court right now. But what would a man like that do as governor, where he can perhaps do executive actions, take something right out of Biden's playbook and try to usurp authority? We see him, he's always grandstanding for just about everything.
Yep.
So this is who I think in the end is the real enemy, is we must defeat Josh Shapiro in 2022. Talk about Josh. How do you differ from him? We know on guns how you differ from him. What's the threat with Josh Shapiro? How can Doug Mastriano solve the problems of Pennsylvania, along with the legislature and the people? What's the story with Josh?
Josh is a polar opposite of me in every regard. He does not hold these truths to be self-evident. We saw how he did nothing. He stood aside when Levine and Wolf unleashed death and destruction and the plague in our elder care facilities. He did not investigate it then. He investigated the homes that were told to take these people back that were sick, that should have been quarantined in hospitals. He doesn't hold anyone accountable that's within his own political circle. I mean, especially at the gubernatorial level. If you think about this here, why didn't he look into election integrity? Because it benefits his party? What about restoring faith in our system instead of playing politics? We see a difference a good man or woman can make, quote unquote good. And it's a problem, and I'm somebody who really doesn't like the cold weather. It's a problem, and we've gone down the drain pretty far when South Dakota looks like a good alternative to Pennsylvania. That's a problem because they have a decent governor. It's when people are flowing to Florida, which is already attractive because of tourism and the weather. But, Florida is not an energy producer. We should be outshining Florida in every regard, especially because we are the seat of a nation, as William Penn said. This is where America came to life. This is where we were born in Philadelphia. and a new birth of freedom in my area here in Gettysburg. We should be the light of the nation. And we keep on settling for the same old tire chestnuts, Republicans, and it's just stupid chestnuts and their lies. Someone like Doug Mastriano can't win the general election. You said those same clowns said that about Donald Trump in 2016.
That's right.
What about Philadelphia and Allegheny? By the way, Allegheny County, Pittsburgh is one of my biggest supporters, by the way, ironically, looking at my statistics online. People want their freedoms back, and they're looking at somebody in the form of me, who's not some rich kid who grew up entitled as Tom Wolfe or Josh Shapiro, but somebody whose family was middle class. My dad was a veteran, high school dropout because of the American dream. He was able to, get his life back. We got somebody, every veteran knows this here. You put your life on the line for this nation. This is no joke. Our freedoms are precious. And, almost my entire adult life was in uniform. Most of my 20s, all of my 30s, all of my 40s, and part of my 50s in uniform. This is something I take seriously. So I would just say, look at what I've done during the shutdown. When you needed your senator or your representative most, where were they? And there's only a handful that actually cared and did anything when you needed them most. And so I'm a man of action. In the military, we're trained to be problem solvers. Whatever the problem is, we try to find a resolution. And Val knows that. We're not about this, whining and complaining. Oh, it's so terrible in Harrisburg and D.C. That's why that hit me so hard when that kid said, "Well, Colonel, do something about it." That's right. And one last thought as I wrap up my thought is, well, Doug, my vote's not going to count. Blah blah. I'm not going to go. Then you're part of the problem, and don't complain. Virginia has lots of problems like we do. Virginia got a good governor in place here because the people showed up. They showed up in force. They volunteered. They donated to him. And so it's not a one-man show. Doug can't do it alone. He's got to do it with the people of Pennsylvania. And I do believe if we stand together, as Benjamin Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we'll hang separately. If we hang together, we'll take our state back. And Pennsylvania will be so free and such a great place to live. It'll be unprecedented in our history.
Hey, thanks, Senator Mastriano, for that. That was a great way to end it. But I just want to tell everybody, hey, right below here, you'll see a link. joingunowners.org/join. If you like what you saw tonight, we're backing Senator Mastriano 100%. Follow that link to join GOA. Our memberships are it's going to really break you. It costs $25 for a year. And I always tell people it's the best $25 you'll ever spend to protect your Second Amendment rights. So just join, get signed up for our list, go to our website, and dougforgov.com. That's the other banner I'm going to put up here. I'm going to end with that. dougforgov.com. Get out. May 17th, vote for Senator Mastriano in the primary for governor of Pennsylvania. And I think with that, we'll end. Thank you, Senator, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. God bless you all.
Bye-bye.